All right, welcome to another episode of Comic Book Squares. We just want to remind everybody about our big contest for 2023. We're going to help find a new writer in comic books. We're partnered with Dream Foundry on this, and just remember the deadline is the end of September to get your stories in. So to kick the show off, my name's Shane.
I'm Paul.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Mike. Let's get this show started.
Welcome back, everybody, to our newest episode of Comic Book Squares. For this episode, we have one of the best, absolute best creators in comics, Liam Sharp. Liam's done work for Marvel and DC. Every character from Batman to Spider-Man, Spawn, Man-Thing, which is awesome. I love it. I like the horror aspect. One of his latest projects that he did for Images called Starhenge. Just a fantastic story about King Arthur, Merlin, and time travel. Three pretty cool things right there. So Liam is also, Liam, we've noticed you branched off into novelization. So obviously we're really happy to have you on this evening and talk about whatever you'd like to. So, go ahead and tell us a little bit about Starhenge, the novels, any other projects you're working on.
Well, the novels actually go back a long way. I'm trying to think which year I did that in, round about 99, I guess I started writing the first one, God Killers. And it was basically off the back of, I'd done Spawn the Dark Ages, and that had come to an end. And I was just struggling to get some work done. And this was an idea I'd had knocking around for a long time. And I thought, how do I want to do this? I'd sort of pitched it as a comic a few times and it hadn't got anywhere. And then I just thought, how did I originally see this? The truth was, I'd always had it in my head as a novel, so I just thought, well, I'll start writing and see how I get on. I've got this time, and I needed to fill it with something. So I started. It didn't get published until 2007, I think, the first edition, and then we did another in 2008. And we're meant to be doing another one later this year. I've written the sequel to it. It's been a long time coming. I actually finished that a long time ago, but I've kept coming back to it and writing more and more, sort of making it richer and bigger and longer and more detailed. And I found a publisher up in Portland called Roots Publishing. And they loved it. So I'm really pleased that God Killers is coming out. The first one, Machiavellian's Point and Other Tales, and this one. And actually there's going to be like a third volume of related short stories that I'd written sort of set in that same universe as well. And then there's one other book called Paradise Rex Press, which was published by PS Publishing about 4 or 5 years ago. That's the weirdest of the lot. It's I don't even know what you call it. It's almost a kind of weird meta self-portrait, but and it's funny because China Mieville is one of my absolute favorite authors. He wrote the afterword for it. Oh, he's just amazing.
Yeah.
So I met him in San Diego, actually.
Oh my gosh.
God, when would it be? Around about 2003. And I got in the queue, and I'd got, I think it was the Scar. It's the last of the Bas Lag novels. I'd queued up to meet him and sort of gave him the art book that I had at the time. It was called Sharpenings. It's one of the first ones I did. And sort of shakily, he said, "Oh, give me your number, give me your number." I sort of wrote it down. And about 2 or 3 months later, I got this phone call. And he said, "Liam?" I was like, "Yeah." He said, "It's China. I've been trying to get hold of you. You wrote your number so wobbly that I couldn't read it." He said, "I didn't know it was you. I've been a fan of your work for years." So that was lovely. Gosh. So he wrote an afterword for Paradise Rex, and I sort of sent it to him and said, "I have no idea what this thing is." He said, "How did you write this? I love it. It's completely bonkers, but I'm going to champion it." And
if China Mieville calls your novel bonkers, that says something.
Right? Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Gosh,
he's a lovely
boy,
guy.
How the time flies, though, huh? 2003, and boy, here we are,
crazy.
20 years later.
He is amazing. It's funny because Paul and I, We've talked about Starhenge a few times. We both are reading it and just friggin' absolutely love it. It's gorgeous, first off, in the artwork. And then the story is just so in depth. But one of the things I wanted to ask, and this is like just it's a minor thing in the book, but it stood out to me. I'm from Contra Costa County. That's where I grew up. And so I was reading, the first issue and stuff like that, and it talks about the mythology of Mount Diablo and all of that. And it's stuff that I heard when I was a kid. Are you in that area? Are you really familiar with that area, or did that through your research for this book? Because that just seemed like a good place to kind of centralize part of that story.
No, we live in Walnut Creek, so literally out of our bedroom window, we can see Mount Diablo, and it's half covered in snow at the minute, which is like only the second time I've seen it in 12 years. So it looks a bit like a skiing village around here at the minute. It's good. But yeah,
well, that is the weirdest thing. All three of us. I lived in Contra Costa County as well.
Okay.
When I was on active duty with the U.S. Coast Guard, I was stationed in Alameda. Okay. I actually lived in Concord, not Concord.
Oh,
Concord,
yeah, Concord.
Right? And
we found that out.
Yeah, and the next town over was Walnut. We used to go to Walnut Creek to shop all the time.
That's us. Yeah, we're out up on Ignacio Valley Road, so completely out that way towards the little park there. It's a lovely part of the world. But we're going back to England in a few months' time for just to have some family time. We've been away for 12 years, so. It's time.
It's about time.
And the kids have fled the nest as well, so we're kind of it's just the two of us banging around here, and it's like actually two of them went straight back to England. It's like okay, we should we're going to move in with the kids.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's
well, I guess while you're on the plane, you'll have time to write book 2 of Starhenge, right? What's it, like a 12-hour flight?
Yeah. I can never work on a plane. It's weird. It's like some people do pages and all sorts, but I'm just like, no, you got to shut off sometime. It's ridiculous.
Right.
It's,
right.
But the other thing I was going to say, with regard to why I put the Mount Diablo thing in, it's like issue 2, we've got the Devil's Dyke, who used to live in Brighton.
Right.
So it just, when I was writing it and thinking about having Daryl and Amber and Brit sort of tying the Brit thing together with the American thing and a little bit of our experience there. It just seemed like a nice, just the fact that there's the Devil's Dyke and then Mount Diablo, the Mount of the Devil. It just seemed like I had to make some sort of comment. So I just looked it up and it's not. It's nice though. It's nice. It'll be nice for us too to have that little memory of being around this area. I mean, it's a gorgeous part of the world. It really is.
So are you leaving? Are you leaving like abandoning it, or are you just leaving to go back to England for a little while, come back, or?
Honestly, right now I don't know. We're citizens, so we are able to come back. It's really to do with family does have an expiration date, all of it, and we're all getting up there a little bit.
True.
It's so. Chris's mum, my wife's mum, she moved into our house in Derby. She's just bought a house around the corner. So we're moving back into our old house, and we've got both sets of parents in the same city for the first time ever, and 2 of our kids there. The other one's in Arizona, so we'll definitely be coming back because we're not going to abandon him. And obviously my work's all here and the conventions are here, and there'll be plenty of opportunity to get back. And we're being here for 12 years, we feel very settled. We've got an awful lot of friends here that we care an awful lot about. And they've made it very clear that we will be coming back and staying with them. So they've already cleared out rooms for us.
Yeah, right.
So
sure.
It's good.
You got the orders to come on back.
Yeah.
You know what?
Oh,
And going back to your work, I think what's we've spoken to plenty of creators from all around the world. Ben will tell you. I mean, we've talked to people in I think Syria,
Yeah.
Egypt,
Right. Wow.
Israel, and it. I mean, you can do this. You can do this job almost anywhere. We've spoken to Mike Deodato Jr. And he's worked for all the big companies, done a lot of great work, and he's. I didn't know he was actually in Brazil.
Yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't either. I thought he was in the States, and he called and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm maybe a couple hours ahead of you or whatever it was." And we're like, "Oh, you're in Brazil? Holy cow!" We knew he was from there, but he said he has. It's been years since he sat in the same room as the writer or one of the other creators. He just does his work and everything gets digitally transferred, which I thought was pretty. It's cool, but I'm sure he made it sound like he kind of longed to kick around with somebody as well.
It's it's just how it is. It's how it's always been, really.
Right.
And it's interesting when the pandemic hit and all the editors suddenly found themselves at home. And it's like, oh, we can still do this. It still works.
Right.
My friend Ben Abernathy at DC, he said, we sort of switched off, moved our stuff, turned it all back on 2 days later, and everything just worked. And I'm like, well, of course, most of comics is created by people who do that all the time. That's what we do.
Right.
And it all works. We manage it, so why the hell shouldn't you be able to?
Right. Yeah, the only problem was the dang comic shops. They were afraid of people coming in, and you had to schedule a time to pick up your comics, and you couldn't have more than 3 people. I'm like, the store is huge. You can surely fit more than 3. Oh, it's only 3 people. You're not there at 4:15. You're not getting your stuff.
Yeah, that was tough. I mean, I was lucky because it didn't really affect me in that sense, work-wise and everything. And I think, but we were all extremely worried about what was going to happen with the shops and whether they were going to survive it and what was going to happen with the distribution, and all of those things were a big deal and very serious worry.
Sure.
So, and it has affected some people clearly. So I don't take, I feel blessed and I feel lucky and I feel, there, but for the grace of whatever entities there might be in the universe, go I.
Merlin. I mean, and swinging back to that, I mean, Starhenge just recently ended, and well, I'll tell you, I really like the way you wound everything up. I mean, it was no issue was a disappointment. Every issue, the only problem I had, and Ben and I talked about it, was that was one of the few comics I would read, bag and board, and leave on my nightstand, because when the next one came out, I had to go back and read and have that connection.
100%.
There's no way 30 days between I'm going to remember what the hell happened. That was fantastic.
To be fair, I don't think I ever really conceived it as separate books. I think the hardback, the collected edition, runs through with no break. There's no cover breaks. The covers are all at the end. It's one big solid read, and I think I always intended it to be that, because and because I jumped around with the page count too. It's which was kind of liberating. There was some issues where I was like, there's not kind of enough information here. I need to ground it a little bit. So the bit where it introduces everything that's happening in the 5th century and the precursors to Arthur and everything, those characters and the tribes and the whole battle with the Saxons and everything. It was like, I think we need a map. I think I need to put a double page spread in, and it was nice to be able to sort of throw that in. And that was really to the bone. I sort of said to Image, have I got time? I think this needs just a little bit more, grounding. And they've just been great, really. I loved that aspect of it, of being just a little bit more flexible than usual with all of those kinds of aspects of the storytelling, to be able to do like a 30-page first issue and, just have fun with it. So, I totally loved doing that book. It's been a long time coming.
I would say Ben
question
and
on
I
that
feel
though.
lucky.
Oh,
Yeah, Ben and I feel lucky that we found it. I mean, I picked it up. I mean, obviously your name was on it, but the cover jumped out of number one, and I'm like, okay, this is weird, but I gotta have it.
yes.
So go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. No, I had a question about that because you were talking about the liberation of like being able to do the different page counts and all this, but then we follow you on social, obviously, and I saw your discussions about like the problems now, at least nowadays, of the issue to issue releases and maintaining like reader numbers and stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like when you move to book 2, are you looking to maybe go full, like do the full thing in one release? Or are you still looking to do like issues? I don't know if that affected your decisions on that at all.
It's definitely, I've learned so much doing it. I mean, there is an issue with things being a little bit opaque sometimes. There's not, we're all sort of feeling our way, and the things that have success, there's not always like a bulletproof reason why. Some things find an audience despite themselves. Other things probably should have more of an audience and don't have. Even down to the marketing side, how you go about it, because we're busy, and it's like, okay, well, you need, I heard people throwing around ridiculous sums that you'd need for a marketeer to be able to really help push it, and I'm like, I can't afford a marketeer. It's like, I'm a dad. I got kids at college. It's like there's and I live in California like an idiot.
But you got a great view out the window, so
yeah, that's true.
That counts.
But it's I learned a lot doing it, and one of the things that came up was, or became apparent, and one of the things that came out of the discussion was, with independence now, because there's an awful lot. We're in a healthy place in terms of like sheer quantity of material and people being able to put books out. The hardest thing is getting decent numbers on them, or being able to afford to do them. The Kickstarter that I did funded it basically, and that paid for me to not have any income for a year, so I could do the book. Which is hard for people to sort of wrap their heads around. That.
Yeah.
When you do something as big as that, you're going to be literally working 8-9 months with no income. And that is, you can't go, I mean, I'm working and I'm doing it, so I can't go on Social Security or anything like that. I can't claim that I haven't got to work. I'm working, I have a contract, but I haven't got any money coming in. So those sides of it are kind of a big deal. And what I found out was that now, with the number of independent books coming out, a lot of people not only wait for the trade, so they'll buy the first issue to get a taste, and then they go, I'm going to get the trade. And I know some people get really sort of down on the trade waiters, but for me, it's like they're still buying the book, so you got to appreciate it. That it's. I love the books too. The more and more you again, it's like the older you get and the more you get. After a while, it's like, yeah, the book makes sense. Stick it on the shelf, and it's a collection. But what trade waiters are now doing is like, one book isn't enough. I need 3 volumes before I'll commit to this. So you've kind of got this weird long tail thing where I need to do 3 volumes to really have a sense of whether Starhenge is then going to have a big long future, because I did find doing it that it offered way more possibilities than perhaps I expected. I planned 4 books originally with the whole sort of big arc over the whole thing, and then as I got going with it, there was more and more I was interested in. So I really liked Daryl's story, Yeah. The more Daryl became his own thing, I was like, actually, this guy's Kushim Sal. He's like, and that's that. Even that name is that. I was like, I did some research, like, what was the first name anywhere in the world, recorded name, and it's Kushim. So I used him. He's gone that far back. And it's just a really cool name too. It's got a kind of Gilgamesh kind of quality to it.
Right.
So I love this idea that you could do, I've got a bit of a fantasy about doing like a giant treasury size, old school with the dot matrix kind of patterns all over it. Almost like a Conan, Daryl backstory that would just go with it. But, again, these are all things you get excited and fantasize about, whether I'll manage to get around to it. Because, unfortunately, fortunately, I'm not going to complain. I'm a little bit busy. So.
Right? Double-edged sword. And I was going to, Ben kind of mentioned it a little earlier, and you mentioned it too, but, the creator-controlled work. And obviously, everybody, we talk about this with a lot of creators. Everybody wants to do Spider-Man. They want to do Wolverine. They want to do, but after you've cut your teeth and you've kind of felt your way and you've been able to, to network and you've got some ideas. Now you can start to do, you have enough confidence in what you can do to do what you've done. And we tell a lot of the independent creators that are just trying to break in, you don't need to work for the big two anymore. It used to be, I think you almost had to go through them, the 60s, the 70s, and 80s. Who even thought about an independent, and then, those guys broke away in the 90s, right? Todd and the rest of them, and and all of a sudden, they're a force, and it's great, but they allow you guys such freedom, and And you just mentioned it. You've got all these possibilities. And when you were talking about it, it made me think of what George Lucas said about Star Wars. I have all 9 stories in my head. I can only afford to do one. And if they're crazy enough to pay me and it makes a little bit of money, maybe I'll make another one. And it was just kind of like, before you knew it, now here it is, 45 years later, we've got all 9 movies. Like them, love them, hate them, throw whatever. As long as they keep making them, I'll keep going to see them, And that's kind of how I feel about what you've done with Starhenge. I mean, I was hooked from the first issue. So, and I know, again, I know, not to put any pressure on you, but you got 2 guys right here that'll buy the next 6 issues for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like with this. Oh, sorry, Liam. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's just you asked about the formats. I think I'm going to keep it down to possibly 3, maybe 30-page issues, or 4 20-page issues, rather than doing 6. But I've already done most of, actually, probably 80% of a standalone graphic novella that links. It's like, in the future, it's called Or. So it's like what happens to the Queen afterwards, after she's sort of cast herself out into across the universe as data or data. I never know that. I get mixed up now with the English to American terms. I can't remember which is which.
Man, I say both too.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. I get made fun of at home all the time because I'm pronouncing things different ways and my family doesn't. Like, where have you lived? California and Phoenix. That's
right.
That'll do it. Yeah. So yeah, it's so I think that one's, we're looking at maybe November for that one. So we wanted to give the trade a little bit of time to see how that does. I got a copy of the collected edition. That I did like a special, just 300 version thing with a creator special, like wraparound. Actually, I should get it. Should I get it? It's only out there.
Sure. Yeah. I'd love to see it.
Might be the first time anyone's seen it. So that's the...
Holy cow.
Beautiful.
Really, we've done a lovely job on it.
Oh wow.
My gosh.
Dude, I'm liking the look of that. Wow.
They've done it. It's gorgeous. It's like all with the... It's got just... There's some neat little details which, once you start being a bit of a publisher nerd, you appreciate, like the little...
Yeah.
And there's the actual cover itself, which will be the one that's the general one that's in the shops.
Oh, right.
Is this one? But it's got this
without
gorgeous bit
cover.
of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's got this. Can you see the spot of varnish on there?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
and it just highlights.
I like that. As you turn it there. Oh, that's fantastic.
I can't wait to pick that up.
That's fantastic.
So I'm very happy with it, and it's got a cover gallery, but it's got an early script.
Oh wow, look at that!
And then the whole thing all the way through.
Boy,
so it's a bit of a beast.
Yeah,
it's the Snyder cut. I love it.
Oh, can we?
Years and years ago, we're all close to the same age. It was actually kind of cool, in the 70s to read like the last page of Stan's soapbox, and he would like be talking to the fans. That was fun. I liked that. Even as a kid, I was reading that, and I was like, "Oh, Stan's awesome. Let me see what he's got to say this month." And so I mean, the fact that it's evolved to this, and you see that more in the independent books. You don't really Marvel and DC. Rarely you might get one page of, hey, here was this kind of a thing. But one thing that I really like, what that makes me think of is there's two books that jump out. One is Walt Simonson did a Ragnarok version, like his own version of Ragnarok. And it was 6 issues. Actually, he did a second series of it too, but it's fantastic. It's completely, he wrote the script, drew it, inked it, colored it just about everything. He had a few other folks in there too, but he really drove it. But at the end of each issue, there were several pages of rough cuts of previous panels, like 2 or 3 panels in a row, maybe an alternate cover or two that he just decided not to go with. And then there was another book, and it was one of the ones we talked about early on, and I mentioned it to Ben and the rest of the guys, was Department of Truth that James Tynion and Martin Simmons are doing right now.
Right.
And they did the same thing. At the end, there was always a little something kind of to tie you to the next issue. And in the middle, there would be these, as you say, like these splash pages of a map or of a script of a diary. And you're like, why would I read 2 full comic pages of just like a diary? Like, how is that even? And then you read it and you're like, that's why I needed to read that. It really ties the room together like that rug,
There's, did you see the Decorum collected edition as well? That was like pretty amazing.
So I got the first 6 issues. I didn't see the collected edition, but I did get Decorum. I mean, I remember it saying an assassin with good manners and a ton of knives, and I was like, "Hey, I got to get that."
I love that book, but it's got it's got maps and it's got crazy world building and dream diaries and all sorts of great stuff in there. And the other one is J.H. Williams' Echo Land with he's got like the collected edition has got his playlist of the whole process, which is like really going above and beyond.
I love that Ram V, who's he's working over at DC now and stuff. He's great. I love when he's always like sharing his playlist too. Yeah, that go along with his stories. It's fun to get into the mind.
No one wants to know my 50 plus year old progressive rock playlist.
Well, I saw your Rush name drop in there too. So in the series, I was like, oh man, I was trying to find my Rush concert shirt to wear for this interview just to see if I could impress you.
Excellent. No,
that's great stuff.
Go deep with Gentle Giant and all sorts of crazy, forgotten progressive rock. But it's interesting though. I talked to Ed Ribic about this once, and his whole house is a sound system, and he plays drums too. And he was the first time I met him, he was talking about how much he's into music and everything. And I said, look, hang on. If you've got a sound system like that, it's 2 things. You're either into prog or you're into jazz. But I bet you're a prog guy. And he's like, oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely the prog. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. A lot of that stuff. It's funny, too, because I can't listen to the radio today. I just everything on my iPhone is 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And there's some new stuff, but it's guys that were making music back then that have managed to hang on, thank God.
Right. Well, I think the thing is as well, actually, I've worked it out that I'm pretty sure that's the reason so many of us listen to that kind of long-form music is literally because if you're trying to play pop, you're in and out too fast. You can't concentrate. You need something that's like will take you on a journey and provide sort of background ambience for the process. and that work just does it. You know?
Absolutely.
But it's not. You know, I will give some modern. I say that I'm talking about Mars Volta like it's just come out, and that's getting on for 20 years old.
Oh, man. Don't say that. It's been 20 years. So many Christmas.
I know.
Somewhere like it, you know, maybe 15, getting close.
Yeah.
Oh man,
I know. It's terrifying.
Speaking of the process, you know, there's so much world building, so much like in depth in this these book one of Starhenge. How long had you been like percolating this? Was it a long time, like notes and research and all that, or is it something that you just sat down and it was just pouring forth?
Well, I've always wanted to do something with mythology. When I was at school, we used to have a subject called classical civilizations at the school I was at, and basically it was like mythology and the birth of theatre and the birth of democracy and the birth of legends and all sorts of stuff. But it was mostly Greek and Roman. And I did that for 5 years up until 18, which is A levels in England. It was like an opt-in subject, and I really loved it. But there was a point along the way where I thought, why am I just learning about the Greek and Roman stuff? I don't know anything about like really old English, our own heritage. You know, the Celtic stuff and the Welsh and the Irish stuff. And I started sort of digging into all of that, and it's obviously the first thing you start thinking then is like, okay, so the most obvious one that everyone knows is the Arthurian stuff. So what is the background there? And then you find out that really everyone just has taken the Thomas Malory version, the chivalric one. And nobody really knows anything about Malory at all. And actually, it comes from much further back than that. And then it comes back to sort of 5th century and 4th century and the end of the Roman occupation and all of that period. And you start sort of digging into it, and it's just really, really fascinating. So it was really an interest in that. And I had always wanted to do something like it. And when I was first really getting into it, I was reading 2000 AD, and Pat Mills was doing Slania or Slain. And it was like, damn it, that's the book I want to do. Okay, I'm gonna have to rethink it. And Simon Bisley was doing that astonishing stuff, and Glenn Fabry did some beautiful work in that book as well. I mean, just there's so much great work in that, and that was like, okay, how can I do something that's based in that sort of Celtic tradition but make it fresh? So I sort of kept it at the back of my head for a long time. Started looking more at the Welsh and the Irish stuff. The Silver Arm was a book by Jim Fitzpatrick, who is very well known in Ireland. He did sort of the Thin Lizzy album covers in the early days. But he also most famously did the Che Guevara picture that everyone knows that students had on their wall. Yeah, that was Jim Fitzpatrick. Just that headshot, the black and white one. Yeah,
of course.
Funnily enough. So I had his books, and they were basically Book of Kings, and he had a few illustrated books of these old Irish myths, and that really inspired my Brave and the Bold series that I did with Batman and Wonder Woman, and that was really the first time that I was able to do a story that kind of played totally into that love of that material. The first version of Canunus that I got to do. And actually, Starhenge was initially a pitch at DC, and each one was going to, like the first one was going to have a swamp thing in it. The second one was going to be Thomas Malory as Batman.
Oh wow!
It would have been really weird, and it would have jumped through time, ending in the 4th book on Mars with a Superman. And
with Dr. Manhattan looking at a picture.
Yeah. And it was all quite worked out, you know, the 4 books. It would have been Black Label, of course, and and the idea was that each story arc was about 3 issues of 40 pages each, and then would be four books, so altogether it'd be 12. But sadly, that wasn't to be. And then I thought, that's probably for the best anyway, because in a way, by tying it sort of into the DCU, it took away from the characters sort of having their own agency and being important in their own right.
Yeah.
So then, what I really had was like the basis of the story, and I just thought, sod it, I'm just going to do it with Image. And I approached them, and they were very, very cool about it, and just jumped on it immediately, which was fantastic. I was really thrilled. I was so nervous when I phoned up Eric and pitched, because it just seems, you try pitching that story, it's not easy. So there's these robots, and there's King Arthur, and
oh my gosh.
It was complex. Anyway, he jumped on it, thankfully. And it's just, then it was a case of, okay, does it work without the DC element? So I really had to sort of rethink it. And then the other thing was that it was very sort of a bit ponderous, really, a bit too self-serious. I loved the idea of doing something that was really about the Arthurian stuff, especially the Geoffrey of Monmouth, 5th century stuff, which is the period that he's talking about, and the history of the kings of Britain and everything, which is a bonkers and really interesting read. You've read it now, but all that stuff about Arthur going to Europe and just cutting swathes through all the Romans and getting to the Alps, and then planning to go over the Alps. Yeah, it's like, this is insane. Right? I want to see that, Arthur.
That was fantastic. I mean, that was a version that, and most of the Arthur stuff comes in just prose novelization. But you had him as a featured character. He had a personality. Merlin obviously was a strong character, and I agree with you. If you drop Batman in there, or you drop Wonder Woman in there, or something, or Man Thing, or Swamp Thing, whoever, something. We talked about Man Thing earlier. Something. I think they no longer, Daryl and Amber, they no longer are the heroes of their own story.
Right.
And I think the story's fantastic as is. I think what would happen is if you drop Batman in there, people are going to go, I wonder when Batman's coming back. Is it 3 pages from now? And this way the story propels itself.
It was sort of a funny one, because I basically agreed it with Eric and then came down to write it, and I was like, okay, I've lost all of that bit of agency, and I'd put quite a bit of time thinking about it. And then I went back to the very early version that you see the script for, that I wrote 10 years ago for Madefire. It was meant to be a motion book for our motion app thing. So I co-founded a storytelling company. Digital storytelling company, which is what got me to America in the first place. And it was a pretty amazing app and quite ahead of its time, but it didn't quite land with enough force, and it's been tricky in that space. Anyway, don't want to get too bogged down with that, but the idea with that one was that I would do something that was very, very much an illustrated version of the Geoffrey of Monmouth version. Quite straight, quite academic, but drawn in a way that was bombastic. So in my head, I had this idea, like, you do a totally kind of straight academic take on this book, but you get Simon Bisley to draw it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of got an in for people who are just going to, like a bit of blood and thunder and all of that kind of thing, but it's still going to be satisfying for people who are sort of deeply invested in the actual source material. So I started doing that, and then it's just like, no one's going to read this thing. It's it's going to be
Poor
the
guy.
most. Oh my god, you're going to be wading, And I did put obviously a few bits of the text in there, and I personally love it because I'm invested, and it's like years and years of interest in it. But it's not something you sit down and read for fun, unless you.
It's not casual. It's not casual.
Right.
Yeah,
It's not. Yeah. It's not. It's not the Super Friends. On a Saturday morning. That's why I said I leave the previous issue out, and until I got to all 6, and I'm like, okay, now put these suckers away in the box. But but it stayed with us. And I want to touch on something real quick. You talk about the creation part of it. Was there ever a time that you thought there might be somebody else to either help with the writing or draw it, or was your intention to write and draw and take care of all of the creation for the most part? I know there was obviously some other folks involved, but.
Well, like I say, originally we really did look at thinking about Simon doing it. That's 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That version, we never ended up doing a version for Madefire. So I kept it in the back of my head. There are bits in that script that you see in the back of the collected edition that almost comes over untouched. It's pretty much the same. Like going the bit where Uther goes to Ireland or Hibernia and all the stuff with the stones. That was all kind of written in those early scripts.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, it was. When I started panicking and thinking no one's going to read this and this is going to be really ponderous and it's going to be a nightmare. And I'm boring myself reading this.
No.
I was like, okay, who's going to be the narrator? Because initially it was Merlin himself. Problem with Merlin doing it was I really like hard sci-fi and that kind of psycho babble, tech babble stuff. And I wanted it to sort of be,
We love it.
So on the one end, you had a version with Merlin telling the story, and then that just got too complex and too hard sci-fi and too ponderous that way. And then I thought, okay, what about if I make Taliesin tell the story, and then you make Taliesin the old Welsh bard, and you give it that sort of old school, with all the names of the places and all the double D's and the double L's and the Welsh sort of vernacular and language and spelling and everything. And all of a sudden, again, that gets incredibly dense and ponderous. And also there's a problem there about how does he translate the stuff that's in the future that he's hearing from Merlin in a believable way, So that was a problem. And I did get a little bit stuck. And it was really down to my good friend Nick Abadzis, he used to be an editor back at Marvel UK back in the day, but he's done some. Hugo Tate is a beautiful thing that he wrote, and he obviously got the Eisner for his Leica graphic novel as well. So he's a great guy, a really good friend from who I go but way back with, and I sent it to him. And it was a combination of him and my wife, Christina, who both sort of said, stop relying on Geoffrey of Monmouth. You're a storyteller in your own right. Trust yourself.
Yep.
Put some of you in there. Bring some of your own, And actually, very quickly, Amber sort of sprung out of nowhere. And just, that was the whole problem solved. I sort of realized that what you have with Merlin as a character, a bit like Doctor Who or a bit like Gandalf, you need the companions. Yeah, their story doesn't work without the companions. So that became sort of it. That became the solution. And this happened to me in God Killers 2. There's a character called Jerry Longhorn who I hit a wall and I didn't know where to go, and she just sprung in my head, and I couldn't write fast enough to tell her story. And suddenly she's in the story, and I got to the end of it, and it wouldn't have worked without her. So it's the power of the subconscious to sort of come up with solutions. And Amber was the solution. And then the weird thing, there's strange things that happen that are sort of delightful. Like, it seems like I really thought about her name, Amber. And then as I was doing it, it's like, oh no, of course, Amber traps beetles and captures things in time. It's like, that's beautiful. And I hadn't even thought of it. And I must have done on some level. It must have been
Right.
there on some level. So I really, I really love that. When people talk about this whole idea, and I don't believe it personally, but this sense that it feels like you're channeling the idea from somewhere else. Like, you're not really the writer, you're the conduit. Yeah. And things like that, you can go, yeah, I can see why people would think it, because there are times when you're just like, no, I'm not smart enough to figure this stuff out, so it's got to be somebody else.
Subconsciously, I'm a genius. It's got to be subconsciously, right? That's fantastic. Yeah, I love it.
Hey, Liam, we really appreciate you jumping on and doing that interview with us and talking all things Starhenge. As Paul said, we're super fans of the book, so we can't wait for the next. Can you tell us again when the next the one shot you said is coming out?
Yeah, I think we're hoping for November for that. That one is like a Stars My Destination style graphic novel. It is novel. I've written it long form, so it's as much illustrated book as it is comic. And I think all of Starhenge is a bit like that. I know some people don't like the big text blocks and everything. Personally, I like it.
Mm-hmm.
It's taste. I miss those things. That Howard Chaykin Stars My Destination Alfred Bester book. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it's just incredible. Yeah. And I miss things like that. So I wanted to try something in that vein that was mixing the two and making a bit of a hybrid of an illustrated book, graphic novel, comic novel, and just see if I could make it work. So that one is. It's going to be, at the moment, it's looking like it'll be sort of 50, 60 pages, I think, standalone. But yeah, that I've got sort of a plan at the moment that I'll keep doing that. So between each series, I'll do a standalone set in the future, and then focus the series on the past. I have the next series plotted out. And interestingly too, like I was saying, I'm now in this world, and it's just fun to play him, and it's just gone off on a whole different tangent as well. I don't know how long this is going to go on for, because it's not what I planned at all.
That's okay, right? Again, we're glad you're doing it. I mean, we're
glad you're the conduit.
Yeah, right. Thank you for being the conduit. We appreciate it. We're going to get T-shirts that say that I'm the conduit. But I mean, we appreciate what creators are trying to bring, right? And you never know. You put as much as you do into it, and you hope it finds an audience. It's regretful if it doesn't find the audience, as you said, that it should, because I think this deserves a really wide audience. So that's why we've talked it up. We've promoted it where we could, and again, we're big fans, Ben and I. We hung on every issue. So thanks for the work you did there. It's fantastic. And I mean, obviously, you've got an entire, career's worth of work, but I think this is kind of not to say that this is maybe the pinnacle, but I think this is one of the finest works. And I think that's because it was creator owned. You were able to do what you want, the way you wanted it. Yeah. And so it's a labor of love. You don't have to fit inside a framework. The framework is whatever you want it to be. And I think there's a lot to be said for that, to have that creative freedom. So like you said, I know you're grateful for it, but we're grateful as consumers of that.
100%.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
There was times I just thought, for my first image book, You know, maybe the sensible thing is to try and do your most commercial thing ever, and it's like, oh, this. What am I? Again, that word keeps popping in my head. I'm some kind of idiot for putting that book out. You know? But you have to do what you love, and I also sort of feel like this. I was at an age where I felt ready to take it on. Felt like I'd progressed enough artistically and done enough writing with the books and everything that I could do it.
Yep.
Because I definitely wasn't ready 10 years earlier or even 20 years ago. You know, it just wouldn't have been. It would have been too much.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm incredibly proud of it. It's definitely the best thing, you know, most personal thing I've ever done. There's no question about it. I'm proud of it for many, many reasons. I can't believe it's done. That's the weird thing. That year, just where it went, you know, I spent a year in there, and there was times when it seemed unsurmountable. There's so many threads, and how am I going to make this clear? And I didn't want it. I wanted there to be enough mystery. You know, sometimes when you write stuff, there's a sort of tendency for people to want the answer straight away. But I'm like, no,
right.
I want to. I knew. I mean, the end of the book is right at the beginning, and you don't know that till you get to the final issue. But people were like, "How are you going to stick the ending?" You know, and it's like, "Well, I already have. You just don't know it yet."
You're right. Did you read issue 1? Yeah, know, like I said, you know, you wanted people to leave it on their nightstand for a month at a time, and we did that. So yeah. But well, listen, I mean, this has been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you for a little bit. It's crazy how all three of us at one time have lived or live in Contra Costa County. That's crazy. Yeah. I don't know if that's we were conduits there somehow, right? We left a part of ourselves there. But that's it's so crazy. But you know, really appreciate the work you've done over your career. This one, obviously this one jumped out to us, and obviously being through Image, creator controlled is why we sort of focused in on this show. As you know, if you've seen any of our other episodes, you know, we talk to folks that are trying to get their stuff in print or Kickstarter. They're doing everything they can, spending every last dime to go to a con and give their stuff away to try to get there. And I know you've been in that seat, as most creators have. So really appreciate you coming on and sharing, just everything that you have with us. It's been a really great time with you.
Cheers, Paul. And thanks again, Ben, as well. It's, I've enjoyed it. It's gone too fast. I feel like, we're just getting going. You get book 2 going, and we'll have you on again. I mean, it's just right. we'll never run out of things. Well, we got the
one shot coming up, Paul. We'll get him on at the end of the year.
Heck yeah, right? You know what I'm saying? Well, everybody, that was just a fantastic interview with Liam Sharp. It's always a special occasion for us to have such an accomplished creator on the show. We really enjoy the opportunity to bring something different, and Liam's work is definitely that. It's top shelf for sure. And we love to keep bringing you this kind of content, so please don't forget to click the like and subscribe button below. Thanks for watching and listening, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on our podcast. We look forward to seeing you guys in the next one, and remember, look out for the little guy.